So that's what it means to be a witch? Killing people to serve your own agenda? No. Not for me.
Are you sure? Hello witches, and welcome back to Activist Witch, where we discuss witchcraft and activism. You can call me Isha, my pronouns are she, they. And in today's video, we're going to take a look at Agatha all along, the way that Marvel has brought us witches something, especially for us, or has it? We're going to look at the entire Marvel machine, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the actual comics that started in 1939. We're going to look at the lens with which Marvel gives us information, which tends to be made from the point of view of cis white het men, because they write the stories. We're going to look at the sociology and psychology of the superheroes, the anti-heroes, the status quo, and the inherent fascism that sometimes is behind all those things and not on the side of the villains. And since we're here and talking about Disney, maybe it's worth talking about their involvement in, I don't know, Zionism, and what are alternative ways to consider content and entertainment, or even reach out to content and entertainment. And we're going to try and bring it all together, looking at how Marvel is part of the propaganda machine that is the media within Western countries. And the entire point that we don't perceive it that way is that there's the delusion of freedom in it. But we're going to see how feeble that freedom actually is. But before we get started, let me remind you that I've opened a Ko-fi, which is an alternative to Patreon that takes less from creators. And on there you can do a one-off donation, a monthly donation, or even get a tarot reading with me, Italian style. The low-income option starts at £5. And for the foreseeable future, any income that I receive from tarot reading will go directly to support Coaches to Gaza, who are part of the mutual aid groups who support Palestinian people evacuate to Egypt. So if you decide to support me there, thank you so very much. Also, don't forget, we are in Witches for Palestine Phase 2. You want more information about that? Click down in the description where you'll find a link with all information about Witches for Palestine. Because I have learned from my mistakes, I know that a lot of people might come to this kind of video. So just in case, hi, I'm Isha. I'm a fat, queer, non-binary, autistic, immigrant witch of color, and my heritage is Arab, although I live in Wales. So this is to give you a context as to why I might have my fingers in all these pies of marginalizations, because I live them, and living them, I cannot quite help watching media and watching the world around me, noticing things, especially when they try to make it pass as representation, but really what they are doing is making fun of us at best, or actually teaching the world bad shit about us at worst. And indeed, like many other witches, it's October, and what has Disney decided to do? It's gonna give us our little trick or treat, and it's indeed going to be Agatha.
Hey, it's Halloween time. It's scary and it's funny. And also, who doesn't love a witch? I think a witch is pretty rad.
I feel like we're having a witch moment. I mean, I feel like it's a moment for women to be all the things that they want to be.
Agatha all along has started in late September. I don't think that anybody has managed to escape the fact that, yes, there is a witch series out there that supposedly has diversity, representation, different people of different heritage, so many women, female power. Oh my goodness, isn't that amazing? And they're also not children finally, they are grown-up women, finally giving roles to a woman past 30. Isn't that amazing? The first point comes exactly for that, because being pagans, being witches, we are at the margins of one slice, at the very least, of the wheel of privilege, which sees at the top white Christian people that actually celebrate all the holidays. And as pagans, no, we are weirdos and we're looked down upon. And usually when we actually say that we are pagans, let alone witches, credibility is immediately taken away from us. So like every marginalized group, give us representation, give us any kind of representation, give us crumbs, and we'll eat them up and say, thank you, please, mister, can I have some more? But in case you hadn't noticed or you don't remember, the representation that we have got from Marvel about women in general and witches specifically, it's not something that turns out well.
I'm not a monster, Stephen. I'm a mother.
I still have beef with the way that Disney decided to treat Wanda, the Scarlet Witch. Her entire storyline can be summarized in women make baby, women go crazy, they need stopping. So just in case, let's kill her off. And I'm not even joking, like that's the abridged version of the Multiverse of Madness, which is what followed storyline-wise WandaVision. We had managed to keep her alive so far, and now we just transform her in a villain. How does that work exactly? I mean, the entire plot line of turning Wanda evil is Wanda decided that she wanted a family. Everything has been taken from her, and she has enough power to not only keep an entire city under her spell, but also bring back Vision and make, pretty much out of nothing, 2 children. Technically, that satisfies the rules of patriarchy of women are good for children if they are white. So what was so wrong with her that we had to kill her off? Noticeably, the heroes that we pay attention to and they are put in front of our eyes in Marvel that also happen to be women, are they masculinized? Not exactly, because they are still very, very hot. Like, look at the spandex that they put Scarlett Johansson in. But they need to be sexual. That's why, because to be sexualized, they need not to be mothers. If you look at it this way, what Wanda did is not having real children, is having a phantom, a hysteric pregnancy. She thought she had children, but she didn't. That is actually a human condition that happens. And usually we describe very negatively socially a woman that goes through something like that. Which, funnily enough, I think that Disney knew exactly, because maybe it's not by chance that WandaVision did start with the style of the 50s comedy entertainment, because if you knew, or if you didn't, hey, here it is. One of the most horrible legacies of the 50s was the suburban housewife that was kept on Valium to make her survive that kind of life.
A woman interviewed said some of her trouble had to do with having 5 babies in 7 years, with no control over her fertility. There was no savoring the experience, there was only surviving it.
Another hero in that kind of area is Scarlett Johansson as the Black Widow. Oh my goodness, isn't she incredibly hot? And we put her in the spandex and we can sexualize her. And because we can do that, we need to make sure that she never becomes a mother. And to do that, the prize that she gets at the end of her training is to be sterilized.
In the Red Room, where I was trained, where I was raised, they have a graduation ceremony. They sterilize you. It's efficient.
And by the end of her film, we also kill her off. The Madonna or mother, you can't be both kind of archetype the patriarchy has created, you don't really escape. So in all of this, how and why did they bring back Agatha? Agatha was the enemy, the arch-villain in WandaVision. Well, they exhume her for a couple of reasons. The most obvious and blatant one is that they can sell her to us. As we mentioned in Capitalism and Cottagecore, there has been a steep increase in interest in witchcraft since the pandemic, because it was one of the ways in which people made the best of a worse situation, trying to think that the way that we were isolated could also be considered maybe slow living. And so let's start doing our starter sourdoughs and take care of our gardens. Why don't we start making potions? And that's the pipeline, which I completely agree with. Let's be the witches at the edge of town. Because Marvel makes stories, and the point of stories is to give us a moral idea, to leave us with something, with some kind of value. Do not ever make the mistake of thinking that a media machine like Marvel, owned by Disney, is doing anything but trying to perpetrate a certain kind of value of, maybe, I don't know, the capitalist, colonialist patriarchy, white. In this case, Marvel is trying to feed us both nostalgia and representation to sweeten a pill that will be the core value. And the core value for women in Marvel so far is Either you represent the kind of womanhood that happens to be very mindful and very demure, and you're like, I don't know, Pepper Potts, she stays in her lane, she's not with that great personality, and at some point she even carries a child, so the quintessential power of a white woman, giving birth to the next generation of white people. Or you are somehow this powerful and potentially sexy, but also therefore dangerous kind of woman that, no, is not mother material. And even when she tries, she just becomes dangerous and needs to be stopped. We had a vague hint in WandaVision that the reason why Agatha was so interested in Wanda,
I need you to tell me how you did this,
was because Wanda had the power to make life, in specifically her two children. They didn't exist. Billy and Tommy didn't exist until Wanda made them out of magic, weave, thin hair. That's because the message is the only way in which a woman can be redeemed within patriarchy is motherhood. Which is actually bizarre when you think about one of the main messages of capitalism being exceptionalism. So much as we notice in all the Marvel movies, the point is to maintain a certain status quo. You do not get to change things. When you come to change things, usually you are the villain who has these creative ideas about somehow destroying the world.
Almost never do superheroes make, create, or build anything. The villains, in contrast, are relentlessly creative. They are full of plans and projects and ideas. Clearly, we are supposed to first, without consciously realizing it, identify with the villains. After all, they're having all the fun. Then, of course, we feel guilty for it. We identify with the hero and have even more fun watching the superego pummel the errant id back into submission.
Or creative ideas of actually good things, but then you kill people, so you're still destroying, so no good. The issue here is that if you consider the natural arch of a story within the Marvel universe and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the point is always you do not change things. You try to bring them back to what they were. And in this context, the only thing that matters is that the system keeps being what it is. To keep the system being what it is, read patriarchy, capitalism, colonialism, you need to still give a carrot on a stick to people for people to look forward to that and believe that something can change, something can be exceptional. They can be exceptional. And this exceptionalism goes into individualism, and it's the carrot on a stick that capitalism puts in front of us, for which it says, no, the system is not wrong, because there are still chances for the one special person to stand out and change their life and change their situation. So really, when that happens, the system is fair. The only point is for the system to make you focus on yourself rather than changing the system itself. That's why it feeds you those little bits of hope.
Hope. Such a tease.
So that you keep working within it rather than understanding, this needs breaking. So in that sense, Agatha being this witch that tries to get the power and always survive, doesn't matter who else dies around her or she kills, it's exactly the kind of thing. You can be special enough. Agatha is a bit of a not like the other girls in that sense, but we're not going to go into that here.
Don't you dare feel guilty about your talent. You survived, like witches have been doing for centuries. You saw an opportunity, an empty vessel, and you moved in. So you broke the rules. Big deal. That's what kept you alive. That's what makes you special. That's what makes you a witch.
Disney, let's never forget, it's a huge media company worth billions. I think it's the main conglomerate nowadays of media that there is.
In the 2024 Forbes Global 2000 list, Comcast is the United States' largest media conglomerate in terms of revenue, with the Walt Disney Company, Warner Bros. Discovery, and Paramount Global completing the top four. In 1984, 50 independent media companies owned the majority of media interests within the United States. By 2011, 90% of the United States' media was controlled by 6 media conglomerates: GE Comcast, NBC Universal, News Corp, Fox News, Wall Street Journal, New York Post, Disney, ABC, ESPN, Pixar, Viacom, MTV, BET, Paramount Pictures, Time Warner, CNN, HBO, Warner Brothers, and CBS, Showtime, NFL.com.
So the interests here at play are beyond huge. And one of the main interests for a company like that is audience, because audience is consumers, really. So how do they sell Agatha to us? Well, again, witchcraft got its renaissance with and after the pandemic, so there is an audience there to get to. Because it's an audience of marginalized people that might have, therefore, an interest in progressive ideas, if not openly leftists, they realize that we need to make an all-women cast. We need this cast to be diverse. We need them to say things that actually sound like criticism to consumerism and capitalism.
Brooms have been co-opted by the holiday industrial complex as an absurd emblem of our culture.
Because very much like, I don't know if you've ever seen Emily in Paris, when you put the criticism of China in the mouth of supposedly a Chinese person, it all sounds like it's fine.
No, you get more than one shot, Mindy. In China, you only get one kid.
And no, let's never forget that the writers are not the actors that are actually saying those words. Usually those ideas do come, at the end of the day, from white, cis-het, able men. There's also a point about the dichotomy that we have with children being valuable because it's what women give us for the next generation. But at the same time, they don't actually become valuable within capitalism until they are teenagers and they start to have purchasing power, which I'm not surprised is the reason why Billy and Tommy were completely irrelevant. They didn't have personalities specifically, but all of a sudden, when we decide to bring one of them back, it needs to be a teenager, and teenagers are the first consumer demographic that is counted within capitalism. There's also a point of, who am I selling this to other than being witches that have an interest to progressive stuff and diversity? Because who still has the money to buy into entertainment? Let's be honest, not Gen Z.
Ella Kieran, head of WPP's streamed conferences for its clients, is the epitome of the high-flying young global executive. At 31 years old, she and her entrepreneur husband have a 1-year-old daughter, and she divides her time between London and New York. But the couple are still renting, and she worries about her generation's future. The pessimism of my generation is the sense that you cannot change things, she says. If you don't have a lot of money, it does not feel as if you're going to get it. Now, as I have a family, I'm happy that baby food is better, thanks to 5 years of people before me saying, this brand does not speak to me. But you guys got houses and we got slightly nicer shampoo.
Let's be honest, the last generation who doesn't have economic availability to, I don't know, have a house or a stable job, but still has just crumbs enough to care about entertainment and nostalgia, are millennials. Hi.
Millennials are being called the me generation. That label gives us insight into the strength of media and entertainment. Those brands let us reimagine as they offer fantasy, creativity and pleasure for moments or hours of distraction. Perhaps that's why the archetype of indulgence, creating a close relationship centered around moments of pampering and gratification, is the strongest in this industry. Media and entertainment brands let us take time for ourselves to watch, to play and to pretend.
Millennials were children and teenagers in the 90s, so it's not by chance that the witches in Agatha all along are all the age group that the witches from The Craft, from the 1996 film The Craft, would be today. Fairuza Balk, the actor that played Nancy, was born in 1974. Catherine Hahn, who plays Agatha, was born in 1973. The reason why we are given these adult women, and it sounds so cool, is just literally because they are playing onto our own nostalgia of the original piece of media that made us interested in witchcraft, which is The Craft. But whereas The Craft actually had consultants that cared about the history of witchcraft, Fairuza Balk herself, who was into Wicca at the time,
the consultant on the set helped write the chants and the incantations. Pat Devine, she's credited in the movie as the technical consultant, but she was really there to try to make it real. I want the Wiccans to see it and say, yeah, that's not offensive to me. That's what it's like. Andy Fleming, director of The Craft.
There was clearly a care there. That is probably the reason why The Craft is still important nowadays. you can tell that that didn't happen in Agatha. We pick and choose, reassign meanings. I think Marshall, the Witch of Southern Light, even mentioned on the first episode the cameo that Agatha has. It's not the Maid and Mother Crone, it's the Three Graces. It's a statue of the Three Graces.
And who are you?
Well, I'll be. Someone's put a sigil on that boy.
A sigil is a redaction spell that hides something. In this case, you, from witch folk.
We just decided that a sigil shuts people up rather than being an actual thing that we do as witches that usually contains power. It's nothing like what they described there. So they didn't have that care about clearly having a consultant. Or if they did, they didn't listen to them in the end.
I am not one for research myself personally. I don't actually like that. So the way I sort of organized it was I have this fabulous team of writers and I gave them assignments. So they would come in and do presentations. You know, the reason that I hired them, they already had passionate connections to various forms of witchcraft. So, you know, there was that. And then we spoke to a witch, which was, you know, really impactful. And then, you know, we were sort of devouring witchy content. We had crystals in the room. We lit candles and got in trouble.
They just want to put something witchy enough or aesthetic enough, again, see Capitalism and Cottagecore for that, that would make us interested. And considering that there is no representation for witches, for pagans, we will take it. We will eat it up. If I have to listen to The Witch's Road one more time.
WandaVision had the Agatha All Along song. We needed another bop. We needed to bring the Lopez's back.
Freaking Lopez's. The music for Frozen, Coco, WandaVision, they're really, really good at their jobs.
That song is literally part of the kind of marketing that they have done, realizing, okay, these are millennials, so these are people in their 30s and 40s, and they are still very active in all the current social media, so Instagram, TikTok, using songs on this kind of social media. It's how songs become popular nowadays. So making a song that is catchy enough and not by chance. We made it being written by the same people that wrote Frozen, so we can see that there was an intention of it being very addictive to a certain sound. Repetition, I love repetition.
In contrast to streaming video on-demand services, social media is full of content that is bite-sized, snackable, and highly personalized. People log onto these platforms regularly and they can be entertained for a minute or an hour. In the United States, some 80% of social media users say they use social media services at least daily, and 59% use these services several times a day. Across the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Brazil, and Japan, Gen Z, Millennial, and Gen X consumers are consistently more likely to use these services.
That was literally the song made in all the possible versions as well, so that we could use it in Instagram Reels. I am also told by the director at the moment that I'm not great at music, but they are. And Raven is telling me the repetition and the harmonies is very reminiscent of the sea shanties, which again was a thing that everybody got into, guess what, during the pandemic. There are so many actually sea shanty kind of songs in popular playlists about witches and witchcore on Spotify. They engineered this, like none of this, it's nice because, oh, we're just talking about witches. It's studied and very carefully packaged so that all these candy floss around it, the diversity, the harmonies, the nice clothes, is actually there to make us digest the core value at the end of the day. And the core value is not just that nostalgia is a witch with a capital B, but it's to do with the only kind of redemption that a woman can hope to have in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the only way that a woman can achieve a proper redemption arc in media in general is to motherhood, but proper motherhood. What we hear about Agatha is that allegedly she has traded her own child for the Darkhold, which is this incredibly powerful book of spells that allows you to change reality itself.
Did you know she traded her own child for the Book of the Damned? They say no one really knows what happened to him. They say he might be dead. Others say he might be a demon or an agent of Mephisto. But hey, that's what happens when you have Agatha Harkness as your mom, right?
She supposedly had a child. She was a mother in a proper way, not in a fantasy way like Wanda, but she traded her child, the next generation, that is the only value that she can give to patriarchy, by the way, for power, for individual power. Of course, she's the villain. And how do you redeem a villain of that kind? Not the way that we have done with Loki. Which we'll go into. But the only way that a woman can be redeemed under patriarchy, which is motherhood. Don't quote me on this, but I am pretty positive that when we're going to see the series finale of Agatha, it will be because what she finds at the end of the road is not going to be her power back, it's going to be her child, and she gets to be a mom. At time of recording, there are 6 of the 9 episodes out, and peppered around, it's so irritating to see that there are all those things that they know how to lure us in with. From episode 1, we have the queer baiting with Aubrey Plaza.
I've missed you.
I hate you. Don't you want me at my best? Admit it. You prefer me.
Horizontal? Come on.
You love it. The anticipation.
Heart.
You don't have a heart.
Yes, I do. It's black. And it beats for you.
And oh my goodness, a woman that is a proper adult, that actually could be queer. Wouldn't we eat it up? I would. We do mention the mum issues immediately, because with the first trial of The Witch's Road, when everybody has hallucinations and sees their worst nightmares, what does Agatha see? Crib with a baby crying, but instead of a baby, there's a Darkhold. And indeed, the legend starts, she actually traded her baby for the Darkhold, which, going back to WandaVision, when she's so interested in Wanda having created or brought back children, the interest. I wonder why. In episode 4, when we evoke the Green Witch that then ends up being Rio, Aubrey Plaza.
Esse viridis non est facile.
I'm not going to go in the evocation, which is Latin, but the song of Kermit the Frog. I'm not even joking here. It's not easy being green. But we literally make Agatha say, let her not be too political.
May she be smart and not annoying. And also not super political.
As someone who has taken the moniker of Activist Witch on YouTube, I know exactly what it means to tell a woman, a witch, not to be political, not to bring that kind of discussion here. If you haven't caught up, politics is life for people that are marginalized. Decisions that are taken in politics are what keeps us alive or not. Anybody that thinks that politics is a bit annoying doesn't have problems enough to care about them, which means they are privileged. But we put that sentence in the mouth of Agatha, who is a woman, therefore part of a marginalized gender, who is of a certain age, there's ageism at play as well, and she's marginalized in a way. She's also the villain, she's the black sheep, but she says that, so it can't be that wrong to be non-political. It's the problem that I mentioned before. We put these words in the mouth of a character that seems to be criticizing something that they are part of, and so it legitimizes it.
This is so demeaning.
Hey, focus up, Calderu. We can be culturally offended later.
The people that wrote it are not coming from those marginalizations. And that's exactly why they put those words in the mouth of someone that will legitimize it.
There's a man you might have heard of named Kevin Feige, who has it all in his head and knows what everybody's doing. And then, of course, I mean, in all seriousness, Brad Winderbaum, who runs Marvel TV. I mean, between the two of them, they make sure all the projects speak to each other and that the creatives are told what they need to know. And sometimes we're told more because that's wonderful to know what our colleagues are up to. But, that's how they make sure, the wires don't get crossed.
I know that if you look at it, the showrunner of Agatha, Jack Schaefer, was also the showrunner of Wanda and is a woman. And so is most of the writing team. It is a well-known story that Kevin Feige, who is the head of Marvel, purposefully does not hire or fires writers that have too innovative ideas.
Kevin Feige reaped the greatest rewards from Iron Man's success and was named president of the still nascent Marvel Studios days after the film premiered. Now fully empowered to build an expansive cinematic universe, Feige began to drift away from hiring strong-willed directors whose vision for a particular film might conflict with his grand plan, a series of movies that together formed a single story arc called a phase, all meant to mirror the serialized format of a comic book. Over the past 16 years, Feige's tenure at Marvel Studios has generated $26 billion, making him the most revered Hollywood producer since Robert Evans presided over Paramount in the 1960s and 70s. Yet while Evans successfully fostered a generation of directorial talent, the so-called New Hollywood of Francis Ford Coppola, Roman Polanski, and John Schlesinger, Feige's innovation has been to wrest control from the creative process from directors and writers, running movie production from the C-suite down. Both Evans and Feige were known to exercise power of final cut on their pictures, and there's nothing mysterious about Feige's taste. Feige called himself obsessed with deep mythologies. Though he pays lip service to the idea that each individual film ought to stand on its own, Feige has always been most animated when talking in the lingua franca of the comic book nerd, continuity, or the ability to bring that experience that hardcore comic readers have had for decades. The formula that the authors of MCU call the Marvel Method consists of the control that Feige and his lieutenants have over storylines, ensuring that each film fits into the larger arc of a grand, universe-striding narrative meant to unspool over the course of a phase constituted by a half-dozen films. Kevin was in there to make great movies. One of his top aides, producer Greg Kyle, insists. That could never be a guarantee until we could actually control the process.
So basically what happens is that they are given the fulcrum of the stories and they can just write around it, which sort of explains why we have so much interest in diversity, but then the core values are still very patriarchal.
Film journalist Eric West specifically charged. Marvel was bringing in all these journeyman directors who will do what the studio wanted. All these people who they called, frankly, Balli. One example is the first Ant-Man writer and director, who was supposed to be Edgar Wright, a young, imaginative filmmaker with a distinctive voice who could make a Marvel property his own. But once Wright finally got a script together in 2011, the Marvel method was in full effect.
Edgar Wright's enthusiasm waned once he started getting notes from not just Feige but also Joss Whedon, who was serving as SAR for all Avengers-related IP and a board of toy and comic book executives at Marvel. At one point, one of Marvel's in-house writers did a pass on Wright's script that left the director horrified. Swathes of dialogue had been altered and references to the wider Marvel Comics universe had been shoehorned in. A week later, Wright was off the film.
And again, the moment that you go out of that pre-directed path, you are fired. Kate Herron, we missed you. The mummy issues come back with a bang on episode 5 because we also have the dichotomy with Agatha and her own mother.
What do you want?
You must finish the witch's road. Without Agatha.
She means punish Agatha.
Leave her with me.
No! No way!
A minute ago, you were ready to slit her throat. Yeah, well, her mother can't have her.
You were born evil. I ought to have killed you the moment you left my body.
Now, culture in general, and Disney very specifically, have an issue that they are trying to work with because they had finally had to catch up on the fact that in the last 100 of years of entertainment, since movies and stuff like that, most of the writers that come to be writers as in the media usually come from very dysfunctional families. If you notice the way that Monica's mother in Friends, basically she's a very softly written narcissist. A lot of writers clearly have gone through this, but they could never actually write mothers as being bad. I think until Cruella.
You're not going to push me off the cliff, are you? You're so funny, dear. So funny. I love it.
Idiot.
And still, the case for Cruella, ongoing how narcissist of a mother she had, even if she was her mother, somehow her natural mother, because they think that that is more valuable if you actually give physical birth, because we like to hate women and make them suffer. So actually, all those things that you hear about, no, you're not a real mother if you actually have an epidural, that. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. In Cruella, we allow the mother to be incredibly evil, but the result still needs to be if a child, a girl actually, dares to then take vengeance on the mother, she is automatically evil as well, just in case. There's this incredible amount of peril that women are put through, but that they can never take action against, because if they do, they become at fault themselves, which is the patriarchal idea of a woman needs to take it and never rebel and never raise her head. And actually that suffering makes you more valuable, which is also a derivative of Christianity. You will achieve enlightenment through suffering in this life so that you will reach paradise later or something like that, I guess. But now that we've taken a look of how and why do they properly sell Agatha to us, let's go more in detail about this thing of motherhood. And how and why do we see motherhood this way, at least through the MCU so far? Because that's what happens when you look at motherhood through the lens of patriarchy, and you do that when you have men write women. Again, lest we forget, Wanda was the example of women make babies, they go crazy, they need stopping. Agatha, just in case, is immediately there as well, because if before she was evil, at least for power and stuff like that, no. When we see the Darkhold in the 3rd episode, and instead of a baby, there's this book, and oh, what did she trade? What did she lose as a mother? We immediately get the same message. Women make baby, go crazy, they need stopping. And it's not surprising that that's the view of men. Like, the MCU is headed by men, it's written by men. The first movie of the current MCU era started in 2008 with Iron Man. And even before that, when Marvel Comics was funded and started in 1939, it was comics written by white men for white young men. And by the way, it's not by chance either that it started contemporary to World War II. But we'll get there in a second. The point about motherhood, and I discussed it in a couple of videos before, in the Turfs and Witchcraft video, in the Maid and Mother Crone video, motherhood is upheld so high by patriarchy because, at the end of the day, it's the one thing that patriarchy needs women for. Women are needed to propagate the species, to continuate the species of the desirables, which usually means white women. If you want to get a deep dive in how terrible things happen when women are non-white and therefore not part of the desirable kind of species that the patriarchy wants to continue, I will send you to Dorothy Roberts' Killing the Black Body, because that is blood-chilling, and it also goes to show how patriarchy has used the divide and conquer amongst women on the matter of reproductive rights to divide our priorities since forever. We are talking non-consensual sterilization of women of color, whilst white women couldn't get access to contraceptive or hysterectomies in case of endometriosis. And I mean, you see today in the US the kind of risk that you have for access of abortion. And as said at the beginning, these stories that got to us in such a female power repackaged phase are still the stories that have been written by men since 1939. And media is part of the propaganda machine. And the propaganda machine is very good at keeping updated.
If Chomsky and Herman were devising the propaganda model in 2008, it would have free market as a principal ideological underpinning, along with anti-terrorism and the war on terror, that have provided the needed enemy or face of evil, with anti-communism pushed into a backup and reminder/ideological role. Within this slightly revised framework, they would probably place more emphasis on globalization and dependence on government for favours and service, on aggressive government news management, on the rise or strengthening of right-wing mass media institutions, Sinclair, Clear Channel, Fox News, talk shows and blogs, and on the real but thus far weak growth of other alternative media, including those based on the internet.
See about the moods and trends. They realize that witchcraft is a thing now. Ooh, how do we reach that kind of people? And give them content that, other than give them entertainment, also give them an idea of what values are important. Because that's the thing, entertainment and the candy floss and the song and the costumes and the representation and the diversity are all part of the corollary, the spectacle that needs to sweeten the peel of the core value. And the core value is, as a woman, you need to be a good mother. If you're not that, you're evil. And through this kind of content, the propaganda machine is also very good at repackaging conservative values in ways that sound immediately more palatable to even contemporary people.
Whereas critics of the propaganda model appear to believe that the societal purpose of the media is to enlighten the public and to enable the public to assert meaningful control over the political process by providing them with the information needed for the intelligent discharge of political responsibilities, we believe to the contrary that the evidence shows that the societal purpose of the media is to inculcate and to defend the economic, social, and political agenda of privileged groups that dominate the domestic society and the state.
And ticking diversity boxes is how they make us take this on. Because all the status quo needs is for the system not to change. Now, let's go into superheroes and anti-heroes, because I'll give to Marvel one thing. This is the first supposedly redemption arc that we get for a villain that becomes an anti-hero, which is Agatha. To me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I have a feeling that a lot of witches have this interest in the dark, broody hero that started with Spike in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, went through Loki, and technically nowadays got to us through Astarion, but that's another video that I'm still working on, so wait for it. But we have this fascination for romance in the shadow. There's a bit of a spoiler for the next video, actually. And technically, Agatha and Loki come from very similar places. You know, I worked so hard to be a good son or to be a good witch, and you, whether it's Thor or Wanda, still get better treatment than me or better results than me. And then resentment ensues. I guarantee you that Agatha is going to get a very different treatment from Loki, and she's not going to get to a point where we're like, no, I can save her, even queer as I am. Now, the late genius that was David Graeber, who was one of the main forces behind the Occupy movement, wrote a beautiful essay that is not that long either, I'll link it down in the description below, about the politics of the superhero genre. And he indeed goes back to the time of comics, when these comics were actually written in times of fascism and Nazism. Graeber was very familiar with the propaganda machine that Noam Chomsky discusses in Manufacturing Consent, and immediately goes to analyze how, well, media that we think is just entertaining, because it's so repetitive in a way. The same kind of format gets to us over and over, repackaged in different stories. It's very good at inculcating concepts and values in us.
Of course, the moment you start arguing that there's any message in a comic book, you are likely to hear the usual objections. But these are just cheap forms of entertainment. They're no more trying to teach us anything about human nature, politics, or society than, say, a Ferris wheel. And of course, to a certain degree, this is true. Pop culture does not exist in order to convince anyone of anything. It exists for the sake of pleasure. Still, if you pay close attention, one will also observe that most pop culture projects do also tend to make that very pleasure into a kind of argument. While it might seem odd to think any artistic genre is ultimately a warning about the dangers of the human imagination, it would certainly explain why, in the staid 40s and 50s, everyone did seem to feel there was something vaguely naughty about reading them. It also explains how in the 60s it could all suddenly seem so harmless, allowing the advent of silly, campy TV superheroes like the Adam West Batman series or Saturday morning Spider-Man cartoons. If the message was that rebellious imagination was okay as long as it was kept out of politics and simply confined to consumer choices, clothes, cars, accessories again, this had become a message that even executive producers could easily get behind.
So we don't necessarily think that we're watching a Marvel movie for anything else than entertainment. But when you kept seeing the same kind of values upheld and you are told that that is good, this is bad, you kind of internalize it. You don't get necessarily to meet as many people, as many different experiences as you're shown in TV and media. But that's exactly why when those kind of pieces of media communicate to you the concepts of right and wrong and what is right and what is wrong, because you're exposed to them quite literally since you are a child with Disney, because it starts very, very early with Disney, it kind of gets to you. You remember that funny meme on Tumblr about Disney gave me unrealistic expectations about men? It's not that much of a joke, because when you keep on being showed the same thing and you don't necessarily have the ability as a human to have all those experiences, all the experiences that you don't have personally, they kind of get through your subconscious through media.
30 years ago, Robin Dunbar theorized humans can maintain a friendship group of 150 people with 5 intimate friendships. Despite many attempts to challenge the theory, Dunbar's number has stood the test of time, backed by neuroscience and statistics. More than a dozen neuroimaging studies have shown that in both humans and monkeys, the size of an individual's social network correlates with the size of their default mode neural network, the large brain circuit that manages social relationships. The evidence that personal social networks and natural communities approximate 150 in size, characterized by a very distinctive layered structure, has grown considerably in the past decade. We see it in telephone calling networks, Facebook groups, Christmas card lists, military fighting units, and online gaming environments. The number holds for church congregations, Anglo-Saxon villages as listed in the Doomsday Book, and Bronze Age communities associated with stone circles.
Also, I mentioned it before, like Disney, I think, is the first conglomerate of media at the moment in the world for value and for ownership of different channels. And when you look at it, it's pretty much an oligarchy, a plutarchy really. So it's actually down to the people who have the money to own all these media conglomerates.
Oligarchy, from ancient Greek oligarchia, ruled by few, from oligos, few, and archo, to rule command, is a conceptual form of power structure in which power rests with a small number of people. These people may or may not be distinguished by one or several characteristics, such as nobility, fame, wealth, education, or corporate, religious, political, or military control. Throughout history, power structures considered to be oligarchies have often been viewed as coercive, relying on public obedience or oppression to exist. Aristotle pioneered the use of the term as meaning rule by the rich, contrasting it with aristocracy, arguing that oligarchy was the perverted form of aristocracy. A plutocracy, from ancient Greek plutos, wealth, and kratos, power, or plutarchy, is a society that is ruled or controlled by people of great wealth or income. The term plutocracy is generally used as a pejorative to describe or warn against an undesirable condition. Throughout history, political thinkers and philosophers have condemned plutocrats for ignoring their social responsibilities, using their power to serve their own purposes and thereby increasing poverty and nurturing class conflict, and corrupting societies with greed and hedonism. Dollarocracy, an anglicized adaptation of the word plutocracy, may refer to a specifically American version of plutocracy.
They get to decide what are the values that we are told are good and bad. And usually, guess what? Billionaires will give us information that allows them to maintain their position. So it's not surprising that one of the main criticisms to the entire superhero genre is actually that it just repackages very conservative ideals because, again, all that the status quo needs is for systemic change not to happen. And the way to avoid that is giving the carrot on a stick, which is exceptionalism, which is individual. The individual can make it out if they have enough ability, enough power, enough courage, if they are good enough in a way, if they sacrifice enough. It's all those kind of values that are given to us that we think are just what defines a good person, but actually when you look at it from a step back of the entire system, they are a way to pacify us. You can also unfortunately see the kind of billions that Elon Musk made by pretending to be a real-life Tony Stark. And I do blame Robert Downey Jr. partially for that. Because fascism and comic books are products of the same kind of era, it's not surprising that the kind of rebellion that is depicted in comic books is actually the exceptionalism of solving problems rather than actually changing a system. Because ultimately, if these things, if these comics are written by men, to young men who need to be groomed to then become the next generation of managers, sheriffs, police, what you need to teach them, what you need for them to internalize through these stories is that imagination leads to rebellion, and rebellion leads to violence.
Both fascism and superheroes were products of a similar historical predicament. What is the foundation of social order when one has exercised the very idea of revolution? And above all, what happens to the political imagination? One might begin here by considering who are the core audience for superhero comics. Mainly adolescent or pre-adolescent white boys. That is, individuals who are at a point in their lives where they are likely to be both maximally imaginative and at least a little bit rebellious, but who are also being groomed to eventually take on positions of authority and power in the world, to be fathers, sheriffs, small business owners, middle managers, engineers. What do they learn from these endless repeated dramas? Well, first off, that imagination and rebellion lead to violence. Second, that like imagination and rebellion, violence is a lot of fun. Third, that ultimately, violence must be directed back against any overflow of imagination and rebellion, lest everything go askew. These things must be contained. This is why, insofar as superheroes are allowed to be imaginative in any way, it could only be extended to the designs of their clothes, their cars, maybe their homes, their various accessories. It's in this sense that the logic of the superhero plot is profoundly, deeply conservative. Ultimately, the division between left and right-wing sensibilities turns on one's attitude towards the imagination. For the left, imagination, creativity, by extension production, the power to bring new things and new social arrangements into being, is always to be celebrated. It is the source of all real value in the world. For the right, it is dangerous, ultimately evil. The urge to create is also a destructive urge. The central theme of the early superhero universes was a prolonged reflection of the dangers of the human imagination, how the reader's own desire to immerse oneself in a world driven by artistic imperatives is living proof of why the imagination must always be carefully contained.
And that's why every single piece of entertainment within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's basically a piece of propaganda for the status quo. In the 80s and 90s, we had openly copaganda, so films in support of the idea that cops are good. If not necessary, they're actually good. I mean, Point Break I've seen recently just as an adult, and it was mind-boggling to me how they managed to turn around the idea of simplicity and rebellion into someone that then eventually kills someone. And so when the creative rebellion becomes killing, that's how we make it wrong. Even when killing is actually not in the character of the person that we have created just to make them a villain. Patrick Swayze in Point Break was exactly that. It made absolutely no sense for him to kill people, but it was a very straightforward, direct way to make him look like, see, whatever he was thinking, everything now is wrong because he has done the one unforgivable thing. killing. And if you haven't noticed, that's the kind of device that is always used to basically prove that when the villain starts to make sense, when their ideas start to,
Clearly, we are supposed to, first, without consciously realizing it, identify with the villains. After all, they're having all the fun. Then, of course, we feel guilty for it, re-identify with the hero, and have even more fun watching the superego pummel the errant id back into submission.
They always need to be immediately connected and coupled with killing, because that way it becomes a bit of a Pavlovian reaction in us. If wanting change actually then always leads to killing, then killing is wrong, therefore change is wrong. This kind of propaganda protects a system, which is the white, cis-het, patriarchal, colonial system, that uses police as protection. And if you weren't updated, all cats are beautiful.
The zine titled A World Without Police explains how, historically, police forces were created to protect the property of businesses and the wealthy and enforce white supremacy. In cities, they formed to repress the growing numbers of poor people that accompanied the rise of industrial capitalism, while on plantations and in agricultural colonies, they formed as a response to the threat of a slave revolt. Policing has been a tool of the ruling class since its very inception, and it has been sold to the masses under the guise of protection. As A World Without Police demonstrates, being an arm of the state rather than any individual person, policing appears to serve the public as a whole, and those targeted by police appear to be enemies of the public. But the only thing they protect is the status quo, which keeps the masses under the boot of our oppressor.
I mean, again, don't take my word for it. Thanos is simply an ecologist. They decide to make him turn into an eco-fascist that decides that for the world, the universe to be sustainable, just half of it needs to be killed. Ultron is being created to make peace. He just happens to decide that the way to keep peace is actually to what? Kill people. Killmonger in Black Panther actually wants black people to be able to stand up against colonialism in the same way and doing resistance that white people have done. He also happens to kill people, so at that point everything is wrong. The Flag Smashers in The Falcon and the Winter Soldiers are literally a group that doesn't want borders and wants everybody to have access to food and care. They don't want patriotism, they want everybody to feel this sense of community. But just in case we make them kill people, so of course they are wrong. Gore the Good Butcher in Love and Thunder, Thor Love and Thunder, same thing. He realizes that the gods are vain and selfish and they are there without merit, which is really close to aristocracy and monarchy. So he sees that they are evil and decides to kill them. So everything that he has done is wrong. Do you notice the trend now? Like, they sound completely reasonable and actually propose a change in the system that would be ultimately getting to a better place for more people than just a few. But then their method always includes killing, even, again, when it has nothing to do with their objective or the kind of person they are. Because again, especially the young kids that watch these movies need to be reminded that careful what you start thinking of doing, because imagination leads to rebellion, but rebellion leads to violence. And because killing is wrong is so simple for everybody to understand, other than being actually one of the 10 commandments of Christian extraction, it's the simplest thing that you can give to these villains to basically become the thing that they do that makes everything they ever said wrong. Agatha also fits into this bit because the moment that we start to sympathize with her, because there's the episode with her mother, we see the kind of abuse that she went through, we start to feel for her, we start to be understanding, and then immediately she kills someone, and in perfect style with the previous villains that we have seen, the moment that you kill someone, even if you made sense, clearly everything that you want to do is wrong, change becomes wrong, and so that's how we avoid the system to change, because we avoid that kind of understanding, because killing is wrong, which it is, but it's curious that it always has to be that one thing, even when it's not necessary. And indeed, what do you get in the next episode? Agatha is now written as a caricature of the witch, that it's just seeking power and evil.
Last one there is a nice person.
Because even when we try to depict at the beginning and with, the monologues about, oh, I hate brooms because they are so commercial, at the end of the day, what we are giving the idea of is that witchcraft is evil. It's all about accumulating power in the whatever way is necessary. And if I have to kill, tough. That's just what being a witch is. And if you keep seeing over and over that anything that is good in theory leads to violence and leads to killing people, you will start eventually to connect the concept of killing with the concept of change. And killing is wrong, and therefore, if that is always the way in which change is portrayed, then change is wrong. And that is, in a nutshell, the way in which principles are instilled into us as if it's a Pavlov's bell. This is how our thread, our subconscious of morals is created. And the media is very good at inculcating this kind of values in us because there's always the pretense of entertainment. Because no matter how media literate we fancy ourselves being, when we are presented the same thing, the same value, the same concept of right or wrong over and over again in a certain way, and we keep seeing the same kind of consequence, horrible consequences, when it comes to change, any kind of change from the status quo, we will end up internalizing them. Because imaginative as we can be, humans still learn by example. And as imaginative as we can be, these stories literally tell us that imagination is dangerous. You need to learn by imitation. You need to internalize these things. And actually, when you are the weirdo that doesn't go with the herd, you feel it. Hello, autism, my old friend. Don't I know this firsthand? At this point, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room. The Zionist in the room, Disney. So if you haven't noticed, in the last year there has been a genocide at the hands of Israel against Palestinian people. And by the way, if you want to contribute something about that, we are running Witches for Palestine Phase 2, which I'll link everything down in the description below about. As witches, we are working with one of the mutual aid groups to support Palestinian people evacuate and relocate to Egypt. And if you haven't seen enough of the horrors of what Israel has made happen, it should at least be very clear that Israel is a colonial project. The settlements is just because people decided this land is now ours, and they had the US and the UK back them up in that, without, of course, any authority in giving anyone the land of Palestine to anyone else that isn't Palestinian.
Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation.
So if you missed the memo, colonialism is alive and well in the 21st century, and it's broadcast to us every day. And every day is an exercise in manufacturing consent, because if I see one more headline that says that people in Gaza die, they're not killed, they die, but every Israeli soldier or person is killed and murdered. I've made actually a Substack specifically analyzing headlines like that. I'll link it down in the description below. It's his own thing. Disney is on the boycott, sanction and divest list, and Palestinian people have directly asked anyone that wants to support them to boycott Disney. A few reasons as to why include:
Disney has come under fire for direct support of Israel, in addition to the $2 million CEO Bob Iger pledged in funds for humanitarian relief in Israel after Hamas's horrific terrorist attack, specifically Magen David Adom and Red Crescent societies. Iger said that Disney will match up to $25,000 in charitable donations from employees. Yet, the CEO has only reached out to Jewish Disney staffers in particular.
Palestinians call for widespread boycotts of Marvel's 2024 film Captain America New World Order unless it drops Sabra/Ruth Bat-Saraf, its superhero that personifies the apartheid state of Israel. The character's backstory includes working for the Israeli government and occupation forces. By reviving this racist character in any form, Marvel is promoting Israel's brutal oppression of Palestinians. We encourage creative, peaceful protests to challenge Marvel Studios and its owner Disney's complicity in anti-Palestinian racism, Israeli propaganda, and the glorification of settler colonial violence against indigenous people.
Now, here's an activism tip. I know that when we want to do good, sometimes it can feel a bit like then I just literally have to buy everything local, I cannot do anything, there's no entertainment. At some point you go, what the fuck? And you get yourself into fatigue. You feel like you can't do anything right. If you actually check the BDS website, they literally say,
"We focus our boycotts on a small number of companies and products for maximum impact. We focus on companies that play a clear and direct role in Israel's crimes and where we think we can have an impact."
Which is not to say I suggest that you cancel your subscription to Disney Plus, to torrent or pirate in any way Agatha, but DuckDuckGo is free. Now, I hope that at this point in the video you got a vague feeling that the free Western media is not actually that free. But it gives you that impression because you pay a ticket for it, whether to go to the cinema, whether to have a subscription on Disney Plus. And the idea is always, I'm choosing to do this. I'm spending my penny here. I'm certainly not spending my penny to be brainwashed. Am I? When then you look at the media conglomerates and how they control the information that gets to us, because there are not so many of these companies. The elite is an elite for a reason. It's the top 1% for a reason. And once they agree on what values they want us to recognize, it's then very easy to repackage everything from media to news headlines to give us not only information, but to give us opinions. Even in situations where you think the media is giving you just naked information, the point is that it's never that way. The way that words are put together are there for a reason and are there to give you an opinion, whether you realize that or not. And that is the reason why so many people, me included, until last year, were incredibly ignorant on the Palestinian conflict because they were told it's a complicated situation. Nobody was told the simple description of what was happening, which is Israel is a colonial project of the West. They have no right to those lands. And I mean, literally this morning, the news were talking about how 1/3 of the entire Israeli government is talking about just annexing Gaza now because they managed to just kill everyone. And what they wanted was their land. This is colonialism in action now, not when we studied the British Empire, now. But what you read from the news and the values in general that you get from media tell you that actually, no, you should be much more careful and understanding of complicated issues that you shouldn't have a word in. The conflation of Israel and Zionism with what is anti-Semitism, it's the way that we have let Israel go unpunished with killing people from the UN, killing journalists, killing children and women, and doing literal war crimes as defined by the UN. But they don't get consequences because the conflation is anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. I think it's very interesting that you will always find amazing Jewish people. Ilan Pappe first comes to mind because having had a chat with Sabrin, who was doing their master thesis with Ilan Pappe, you see that there are plenty of Jewish people that can tell you that they do not stand for the state of Israel and their choices exactly because that is Zionism. It just seeks to destroy another people, which is Arab Palestinian people in that case, to just take over. And Jewish people do understand that that is very much what has happened to them 70 years ago, just done to someone else.
As Jewish survivors and descendants of survivors and victims of the Nazi genocide, we unequivocally condemn the massacre of Palestinians in Gaza and the ongoing occupation and colonization of historic Palestine. Reads the letter, which was published Saturday in the New York Times as an advertisement. We further condemn the United States for providing Israel with the funding to carry out the attack, and Western states more generally for using their diplomatic muscle to protect Israel from condemnation. Genocide begins with the silence of the world.
Something that I found striking to me was the comparison with media in countries that are considered horrible and terrible and terrorists like Cuba.
Well, our Cuba policy is governed by two principles. First, support for democracy and human rights.
Democracy and human rights guide U.S. foreign policy, right? The U.S. sends $1 billion a year to Egypt, whose president led a massacre of more than 900 protesters in a single day. The U.S. gives Israel almost $4 billion every year in military aid, even though Israeli authorities are guilty of apartheid, a crime against humanity. Saudi Arabia is the biggest purchaser of U.S. arms in the world. It is also an absolute monarchy where torture is widespread and protests are illegal.
Our relationship with Saudi Arabia is important. It's important to U.S. interests.
I have a soft spot for Cuba, by all means, but it's very interesting to me that the West genuinely tried to Trojan horse Cuba through media.
When you want to watch a movie or a TV show, you know what to do. You tap your fingers, and within a few seconds, you are watching whatever you want. It's frictionless, it's easy. But in some places, it's not so easy. But Cubans found a way to work around this media blockade to distribute the latest in global entertainment to the entire country, coordinated entirely by an informal market of underground data traffickers, based both in Havana and the United States. It's the fruits of the internet without any of the guts.
American operations get American entertainment through illegal means to Cubans, and then it gets distributed. It's El Paquete. There are a couple of Vox documentaries on it, and you can tell immediately that Vox is a very American and capitalist kind of media company, because even being as progressive as they portray themselves to be, when it comes to analyze why does Cuba not allow media from the West and it needs to get there illegally, because Cuba, being socialist, knows very well the power of propaganda. And they have seen the kind of propaganda that we have in the West and the way that it goes seamlessly.
Acá no tenemos televisión extranjera, acá es televisión nacional.
Officially, there's one source of permitted media in Cuba, and it's the state.
¿Por qué? No sé, no está en mis manos. Solo sé que así funciona.
So what they want is for their people to have the media literacy to understand this kind of thing, and until they manage that...
This leaked video from a government training session shows a presenter talking about the threat of new technologies.
No estamos fajados con las nuevas tecnologías. Es sencillamente conocerlas, usarlas en favor de lo que nuestros intereses, pero saber qué quiere hacer el enemigo con lo que está poniendo en el país.
That's the reason why they don't want Marvel or Iron Man to get there. When you can grow media literacy, that's completely fine. And I don't think it's by chance that every kind of protest that you then see in Cuba is never because the people are not happy with their government. They are always supporting their government. Socialism is working for them.
Color revolutions often tend to be small, especially in places like Cuba, which have so much support for their existing government. And these anti-government protests were very small, despite the US media's attempt to spin them as massive crowds. The giant gatherings we so often saw on TV were actually counter-protests in support of the Cuban Revolution and the government. Here's a video of 100,000 people coming out to say, no, we don't want US meddling. These agitators do not represent Cuba. Because of this massive disparity in size, mainstream media outlets took to using devious means to convince people the color protests were larger than they actually were. Misleading and doctored photos were widely shared during the protests, those responsible relying on Americans being too ignorant to understand what they were looking at.
Do you know what's not working for Cuba? The embargo that the US has established for 60 years.
The blockade is the longest trade embargo in modern history. It isn't motivated by concerns about human rights. It's about money and power. Until 1959, Cuba was like a US colony. Our economy was controlled by US companies, corrupt politicians, and the mafia. After the revolution, Cuba nationalized the US companies. We claim our sovereignty, our right to govern ourselves. The government gave basic rights to the majority: women, black people, campesinos, the working class. The blockade was retaliation. It's basically a form of economic warfare. The blockade stops Cuba from doing business with the United States. They can't buy our stuff and we can't buy theirs. And we can pay for things because banks won't lend us money or even let us open accounts. The blockade also stops Cuba from doing business with other countries. That's not all. The blockade also locks us out of a big part of the internet.
If America is so convinced that socialism is so horrible and it would definitely fail, why don't they let it fail without the embargo? It would just show its cards to the world and how it naturally fails on its own. The 60-year embargo in Cuba is still going, and the people are still behind their government. Is there anything more scary for the US than a country that has shown that even under the conditions of an embargo, they still support their socialist government? Because their quality of life, their health, their education is so high, so much higher than the US, despite being quite literally starved because of the embargo, because of the blockade. Like, looking at the current state of propaganda through news, through media that we have in the West, it's beyond ironic that the US try to say, oh no, Cuba is so cruel to its own people, let us get the entertainment to them, let us give them free internet because we want to make them as free as the West, or rather, give them the same information from 2 to 3 sources that give them the same kind of opinion, and re-educate them into thinking that capitalism is freedom. No, capitalism is the freedom of the rich people to make you overwork and extract value from you. That's the freedom. That's not yours. It's the freedom of the billionaire. I mean, we looked into the meaning of neoliberalism in Capitalism and Cottagecore. If you want more information about that and the history of capitalism, I'll send you there. Cubans simply know that the Western propaganda is insidious because it is masquerading as entertainment. The reason why the Western propaganda machine is so effective and it keeps us pacified is exactly because, while keeping us entertained, it makes our values grow in a direction that makes us wary of change. We fear change. Why do we need to change? What I know today is what I know, at least. And at the cornerstone, it has the delusion of the freedom of choice. I choose to stay like this. And of course, again, if you choose to pay the ticket, would you pay the ticket to be brainwashed? But that assumes critical thinking and a lot of media literacy. And I can guarantee to you that the brightest of us look at entertainment with the idea of head empty, no thoughts, which is when that critical thinking is actually turned off. And I get it, like, life is hard. We need to be able to turn off our brain at times. Just, mindless entertainment, Marvel, Emily in Paris, that kind of brainless stuff, but colors, nice things. And I wonder, why do we need something that allows us to turn off our minds and just be dopamine excited with nice colors and things? Might it be because of the life that we lead within late-stage capitalism? The reason why propaganda through entertainment media is even more insidious than the kind of propaganda that gets to us via media companies through headlines is that the human experience that we experience firsthand is limited. Physically, in person, in real life, one human knows a grand total of 100 people. And that's the entire first-hand experience of life that they know. So for everything else that we cannot touch with first-hand, we have the representation of culture and society through media to learn from. And that is why we absorb the family values from the sitcoms of the 80s, pretty much like it was shown in WandaVision. We internalized the morals and ethics after 9/11 that told us that the terrorists are always Arab. despite the major threat in America to security being domestic terrorism. And that's why we're also taught that cops are always necessary, if not actually good. If the last few years since 2020 and the murder of George Floyd has taught us anything, is that the information that gets to us through the media, whether it's entertainment or news, is packaged in a certain way to manufacture our consent and to allow us to be pacified while governments do incredibly dirty and dirtier things. I mean, the Palestinian genocide has been broadcast by Palestinian people from Gaza, and the way that that is in a stark contrast with the way that information gets to us through the news instead should have shown us by now that there's a huge gap between reality and the way that it's served to us by the media. And what is shown most prominently is that, again, information is given to us not to just give us data, but to give us an opinion already formed. And that opinion is the opinion of the oligarchy, of the plutarchy, that has a vested interest in keeping that kind of values going. And in that, I am sorry to say, Agatha is absolutely no exception. And that is exactly why so many superficial diversity boxes are ticked in it. From people of color, to queerness, to even hearing the kind of woke things that we witches say about ourselves. No, don't make it too commercialized. That's insulting. They are all there to sweeten the pill that needs to then deliver to you the core value that will be given at the end of this series. To see the one redemptive quality of an evil witch that, according to patriarchy, will be being a mother. But hey, let's see if I'm wrong. And until the next video, I really hope that we can hex the patriarchy together, because there's need for it.